It's Sunday, January 12, 2025. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. Our guest today is the host of On Democracy with FP Wellman and Democratic campaign consultant Fred Wellman. Welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Good to be back, brother. It's good to see you again.
It's great to see you too. Yeah, and Happy New Year. Fred, this week marks 4 years since the January 6th insurrection, yet the perpetrator, the instigator, the mastermind of the fake electors scheme and the riot at the US Capitol is about to re-enter the White House. I think that's what's making everybody so unnerved in this moment. Yeah. Just tell us initially how you feel about that 4 years on.
Well, there's two failures of democracy. The failure of democracy that allowed that entire event to unfold in the first place, and the violence and the disrespect for our capital and the people that are injured and killed, all orchestrated by Trump and his minions. I think the second failure of democracy is the fact they're still free, that the people who orchestrated the whole thing have not seen a bit of justice, and that Donald Trump, the actual guy that instigated the entire thing, will actually re-enter the political office. So it's heartbreaking in so many ways for me, especially with me. You know, my background, as you may know, is I was a service member in the Army for 22 years. I'm passionate about, my oath to the Constitution, which remains, and to see these people who have done so much damage to essentially walk scot-free, and they will. I mean, he's promised to pardon most of them. So I've had the good fortune to become friends with Aquila Ganel and Harry Dunn. And I'm watching their writing, and I just can't imagine the feelings they're having, knowing what they went through is all for naught in a lot of ways, as that person is now re-entering office. So, I had a lot of anger that day. If you remember, I was still with the Lincoln Project then. It's actually what instigated me to take over the damn thing as the executive director. So I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in a lot of people, let's put it that way, because I think we had a chance to have stopped this, and our adherence to norms and traditions held us back from true justice. And that really upsets me.
There's kind of two schools of thought as to what went wrong in the kind of preceding months and years. The first, I guess, lies with Merrick Garland and the Justice Department's failure to seize upon this as the momentous event that it was. I mean, it's unprecedented in American political history, certainly in our lifetime and our parents' and grandparents' lifetime. And yet it was slow walked. And we've since heard through discovery that Christopher Wray, FBI director, recommended it probably wasn't a good idea to go after Trump. And so here we are now with a new Trump administration, or Trump regime, as I'm trying to call it, on the way in. Do you put the blame there, or do you put the blame with the system of justice and those guardrails that people keep talking about that I'm still yet to see actually work?
Yes. You know what I mean? I mean that in the sense of, those are all to blame. I mean, it's like a lot of these things are complex. There's not one single failure point. Yeah. I do blame, look, and it's going to get me in trouble and you're going to get yelled at in your comments, but I do blame Mr. Biden. Joseph Biden, I really have a lot of respect for him. I believe he's been a momentous president, but I was concerned. I actually did an interview right here in the Midas Touch Network, actually. I think Memorial Day with the Midas Ellis brothers. I did an interview, and it made a bunch of news clips on MSNBC because I said, my fear with Mr. Biden is that he's an old school senator. He's 50 years of public service. He was a senator, which is the most collegial of the places. He grew up in a Senate where we still called him my dear friend across the aisle. And my fear at the time was that his adherence to what had been the norms and traditions of his entire adult life, the majority of his life, would preclude him from truly doing what needs to be done in a very aggressive and formal way. That goes to nominating Merrick Garland, which we now know was pushed by Ron Klain. Merrick Garland's, again, another dyed-in-the-wool traditionalist, norms and traditions, Ray, another. And so you look at, and what really frustrates you when you look at Brazil with Bolsonaro, guess what? Bolsonaro got arrested, right? You look at South Korea where the parliament convened and they arrested the guy. I mean, you see these other countries that enact. I know, look, I get our constitution's difference, but we decided that what was essentially a political act, but a political act of violence, they took off that criminal part and they made it just a political act, right? And so when they decided it was a political act, then everything that we did to try and stop it became political. So while we did prosecute people for the little crimes of beating police. We didn't prosecute anyone for organizing the beating of the policemen because that was political. And here, what we have to show for it. 4 years later, we've elected the same guy. And then that's the next piece, the political part, which was the belief, and we are reading stories about this, the belief that people would get it, that there was a hesitance within the Democratic leadership thinking that, well, we don't really have to go after these guys because the voters will take care of it. And it showed such a disconnect from the reality of where we all live in the real world. I live in Missouri. I assure you, I never had any doubt the voters would not punish Donald Trump. Right. I never for one moment thought Republican voters would punish Donald J. Trump. And anybody who, look, I hate to accuse people of the DC vacuum, but you have to be in a real vacuum to think for even a moment that the MAGA adherents would ever turn on Donald J. Trump. And so it took Biden like 2 years to figure that out, I think. And I don't think Ray ever, or I don't think Garland ever figured it out. I think he was much more interested in the traditions. I mean, I keep getting stuck on something he said, Anthony, in one of his many appearances in Congress. And the Republicans are going after him. And in a fit of pique, he said, my job is to protect the Department of Justice. No. I'm sorry. I couldn't disagree with you more, Merrick Garland. Your job is to prosecute fucking criminals. And the criminals that attacked our Capitol, killed 5 people in the end, hurt so many police officers, damaged our democracy. That was your job. It wasn't protecting the Department of Justice for just 4 years. It's about to be dismantled. So I do have a lot of blame. It goes against the grain. Every time I say this on Blue Sky, I get hammered, and I get it. But look, I'm an Army officer. I think I say a lot, Anthony, if you follow me, is, I was an Army officer. And in the Army, we would go train at a place called the National Training Center in California. We trained at the Joint Readiness Training Center in Louisiana. I was a helicopter pilot for much of my career. There was a helicopter back here. And one of the things I learned in the Army that I really loved, and we all hated when we were in, was called an after-action review. So every mission we did at the National Training Center, you had these guys who were professional bad guys. We all wore laser tag stuff, basically. And you'd fight a battle, and we'd go back. When the battle was complete, we would literally go back to our unit, and the guys who ran the thing, the observer controllers, would come in, and we would do a deep dive, step by step, of what we did right and what we did wrong. And of course, it's this training. More often than not, it was wrong. and it was uncomfortable. You would have a full bird colonel sitting there getting criticized for his decisions in front of his troops. But it became the Army instituted this policy, and it became such a norm for those of us who have served. It's perfectly natural for me to do something, win or lose, and say, okay, what do we do right? What we do wrong? And there really feels like there's a hesitance to do that. And I go back to 4 years ago. There should have been a hard look for the Democrats to say, okay, what did we do wrong leading up to January 6th? And what can we fix? And I feel like here we sit, like you said, January 12th, and 4 years later, and I'm not necessarily sure I think anything got fixed. And that is really, really heartbreaking. And a lot of people pay the price for it.
An interesting move, though, by trying to denigrate the Department of Justice throughout his even his first term in office, let alone during Biden's term.
Yeah.
What that did was it pushed Garland maybe to feel like he had to protect the department rather than actually go after the instigator of this scheme. And I think people forget because we're so used to watching the riot and rewatching the riot on television. The riot was like the exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. The sentence started with voter suppression. It started with the fake electors scheme. It started with, all
these votes showed up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m. And don't forget, he went on TV 2 a.m, said he'd won. He was done. He won. And he wasn't,
And the point there is that was the moment that he could have been led away in handcuffs and the story might have been over.
Right.
But does this talk to America and the culture of freedom, and that actually you can do anything you want and you can be anybody you want? I mean, because that's what I struggle with, because I refer to the US as becoming increasingly lawless. And when the guy at the top who commits an insurrection against his own country is allowed to go free, then to me that trickles down.
And we see it in our daily lives. We see this constitutional sheriff movement where they decide they're the ultimate power in their community, all the way past the president. Even see it, you see the actions. And I do believe it's been Donald Trump. The thing about Donald Trump is he hasn't created anything. He's very good at riding waves. He's a master surfer, right? If you look at it, if you look at his style, I think Jeff Charlotte was on my show last year, and he attended a lot of the rallies, and he compared to him those old time, whatever the comedians who would tour around the mountains of New York, and they would test their jokes, and what worked they would keep, what didn't work they would get. The Catskill comedians, and that's what Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a master marketer of Donald J. Trump, and he's always good at picking up what's going. So this movement was always kind of going on. There was an extremism. Hell, you could date that back to the Murrah Federal Building bombing, right? I mean, honestly, that was a right-wing militia movement that did that, an Army veteran, unfortunately, which takes us to last week. But having said that, he knows how to glom onto that and ride it. And the problem was no one would discern the political from the criminal, and understand that yes, prosecuting Donald Trump is political. Okay, accept that, and that's what bothered me is the lack of courage. It almost seemed like sometimes some of these guys were more worried about the criticism they would get from Fox News and the far right and the Republican the senators, than they were about actually enforcing laws in a direct way. You're right. Especially, I mean, when Brazil sets the example by marching into the palace and arresting the guy, or South Korea marches in the palace and arrests the guy because no shit, he broke the law. We just all saw it on TV, and we dork around for 3.5 years, a year and a half to even put in a special counsel who then follows the law because they're all, it's infuriating. And you have to ask yourself, we have to start asking hard questions about our institutions as they're designed and say, have we designed a system that allows the lawless to occur? Like you said, we're becoming lawless because what Donald Trump so much, and this is what I said even 8 years ago or 9 years ago, is Donald Trump has figured out, Donald Trump's entire life has been built around not what he should do, but what he can get away with.
Yeah.
His entire life. You have people who have lawyers, and lawyers say, sir, that's against the law. They go, oh, you're right, we can't do that. No, what Donald Trump asks his lawyers is, what can I get away with? Like, what's kind of against the law, but, it's like driving 10 miles with the speed limit. Donald Trump has spent his entire life 10 miles with the speed limit. And when you have someone like that, but against a Joe Biden who's like, oh, the speed limit's 55, I'm going to go a nice say 50 because I don't want anybody to think I might be like, if you see my car, it's a fast car. So they might assume I'm going 55. So I'm just going to go 50. You see what I'm saying? And you got Donald Trump's like, I know fucking 70. And fuck all y'all, right. It's going to flip you off as he does it. And none of our systems are prepared for that. Our mighty checks and balances.
And we could see these threats, and we've heard from Trump already the idea of shutting down news organizations, and ABC settled with a $15 million, the
case they would have won eventually.
A case they would have won, exactly. And so people are very angry about that. But again, this is part of the problem of having the corporate media, having these kind of oligarchical ownership, which means that there's connections in other places, whether it be theme parks or government contracts. Mark Elias is the lawyer that seems to be the only person who is up for really saving democracy. But I just want to quote something that he wrote a few days ago. He said, "We're sliding towards an illiberal democracy. The phrase first popularized in the 1990s took on new urgency in the US as major figures in Trump's orbit came to view Viktor Orban as a leadership role model. He said, while illiberal democracies have elected governments, they lack the guardrails to protect individual freedoms and rights, things like rule of law, a free press, an independent judiciary, and professional civil service are viewed by those in power with hostility." You were talking about Biden being an institutionalist. Trump and his surrogates plan to actually shut down the very institutions that we rely on, and even by arguably putting nutcases in to lead these organizations like Kash Patel, for example. That is as good as shutting them down, isn't it?
It is, and that's not without talking about Schedule F, where they intend to replace willy-nilly any civil servant who goes against them. They've already said they're already vetting civil servants based on who they donated money to. So literally, if a civil servant who's in a key position, a statistician or a doctor even, maybe gave money to a Democrat, they may lose their job just for no reason because they're allowed to under Schedule F to be replaced by a Trump sycophant. So yeah, it's very dangerous what they're talking about doing. They will dismantle. Schedule F is a dismantling of our civil service, period. That's all it's for. And the goal is that the guardrails that did survive last time, which was the bureaucracy's perfect power of dragging their feet. Bureaucracy is very good at not getting things done when they don't want to, which is always a frustration for them. Like, as an Army officer, you hated it, And so they hate it too because they know it stopped them from their most extreme thing. So yeah, Schedule F is even more disconcerting than the people they're going to appoint. I'm hoping that Pete Hegseth's too busy to bother with me, but he'll put people in who may have time. And that is concerning for a lot of people. What happens that, like somebody said, you'll never be able to trust a government statistic from this ever again, because they'll fire the professional statisticians and put in people who say, oh my God, best economy ever. Like, wow, yeah, I mean, we're the world. I mean, China. I mean, like, you don't have to look far for examples of how everything's hunky dory for these countries. So it really is disturbing to see what they've promised to do and what they will do. And I get a lot of heat because people say to me, I say, we got to do more. We got to look at our messaging, how we message, where we message, how we reach people, who's messaging for us, all those things. And a lot of our folks on the progressive all get very mad at me. It's like, no, this is all Donald Trump's fault. It's like, no, I'm worried about the 72 million, whatever it was that voted for him. I can't change their mind. I'm really worried about the millions and millions that didn't vote at all. The stay-at-home.
Well, it's 90 million. I mean,
90 million. Yeah, 90 million eligible voters who stayed home. Where do we go wrong there? How do I convince 8 to 10 million of them to get off the fence and participate? How come we didn't reach those 90 million? It's not about convincing these Trumpists that they're right or wrong. I'm not going to do that. Okay. I mean, I can few, but every dollar we spend trying to flip one Republican who's a MAGA, instead of trying to get our own people to say, this is so important, you must vote, is lost money. And I worry about that. And I ask that question because 2025 is an election year. Every year is an election year in America. We get so focused nationally on the 2-year cycle, but really, 2020, there's 31 states having local and statewide elections just this year. They have special elections in Virginia, or did this week, sorry. They have special election in Virginia this week for some delegate and Senate positions. We've got special elections for the seats that are vacated for the people that went to the Congress with Trump or the cabinet. And then we've got like primary start in Oklahoma, I think Wisconsin, this month, January, for Supreme Court positions, local positions. Virginia's got a governorship. New Jersey's got a governorship. There's elections this year that can send a very big message for our democracy that we have to take, and thousands of local positions. So I'm encouraged to say we have to answer this question very quickly of why our message didn't reach the right people. It's not even if it's right or wrong. It's just how they never heard it. I mean, and the example I give to that, Anthony, is how many people in polls, when they were presented Harris's policies, said, oh my God, I love these. And then, and then when they were told they were Harris's policy, said no. It's like, okay, so there's a disconnect. If we don't address that, we'll pay a price again.
I just want to pick up on this idea that a huge number of people chose not to vote.
Yeah.
That election has been widely characterized as one of the most consequential political contests in recent U.S. history. And although turnout was high for a presidential election, almost matching 2020, as we said, almost 90 million people, that's 36 of the eligible voting age population, did not vote. That's more people that voted for Harris and Trump chose not to. And obviously there's a lot of people saying, well, voter rolls were purged and, that there was actually a kind of operation to prevent people from voting. And we know about the voter suppression tactics that the Republicans are obsessed with. But the levels of 90 million not voting suggests to me that this, as you said earlier, is really about people being so disengaged, feeling that either they were in safe swing states and therefore their vote didn't really matter. That was a kind of big issue, wasn't it? But also people just general voter apathy, whereby the feeling is, well, I'm not into politics. I don't really know what's going on. It doesn't really make any difference to my life, so I'll just not bother.
Yeah, I don't believe there's one single answer, of course. Obviously, it takes a village to fail. I'm not a big believer in the one thing theory. People always say, oh, Gaza, Genocide Joe, or like you said, apathy, or
multiple things can be. Yeah, can
my
be
favorite
true
one is
on the
left. Everybody's racist. That's why everybody's racist. Like, okay, that's not it either. There's multiple reasons, and some of them wouldn't have counted, right? We do know that it was 3 swing states, maybe 70, a couple 100,000 votes is all it was taken, right, to flip this whole thing. But I do think we have to ask ourselves if our messaging is reaching. When you hear like the Pew study that just came out that showed 1/5 of Americans don't even get their news from media anymore. They get it from what they call news influencers, which you and I may be accused of. They're not, I play a journalist at work. And so that's a significant thing. All those ads they ran on mainstream TV, well, a lot of people were cord cutters and never even saw a single ad. And so when you look at it all as a pieces of the whole, parts of the larger puzzle, we do have a lot to address to make sure we're reaching everyone. Now, look, Vice President Harris had 107 days. I don't follow people like to say I'm attacking her. No, I'm a fan of Ms. Harris. I'm a fan of her campaign, but she had 107 days. 107 days is not enough time when Trump literally campaigned for 3 years. People compare a little thing, podcasts. I did this on my show. I examined this. Vice President Harris did. Of course, she did the big deal about the Call Me Daddy podcast, did a couple others. Everybody condemned her for not doing Joe Rogan. Look, man, she did maybe 4 or 5. Okay. Somebody added up. Trump did like 200 in 3 years. If you think about that number of every right-wing podcast or even not right-wing podcast. He did sports. He did wrestling shows. He did comedy shows. He just showed up. And while we would see the clips from our friends here at the Midas Touch Network, like Ron and Asen and Aaron Rupar, other independent journalists, maybe a clip or two of it. But I've watched a few of those podcasts. And like when he was talking, I don't know if you saw it, but he was on Theo Von's podcast. They talked for a minute and a half or two about Theo's former addiction to cocaine and went into great depths about it. And Trump, to his credit, and I hate giving him credit for anything, if I was a neophyte to politics, he asked good questions that drew Vaughn out. And we don't see those, but millions did. And so whereas the Democrats have a nasty habit of being very controlled of their candidates, they're very careful about vetting where they go. They don't want them to be unscripted. They don't let them. Trump's never had a compunction about being worried about being unscripted, right? He's unafraid of being unscripted, right? And so those kind of things add up. We can't deny that they didn't add up. When Joe Biden was the nominee, all but done, he didn't feel wasn't really compelled to campaign per se. He just thought he'd govern really well and people will see the good work, which they did. But apparently many people didn't give him credit for it. So it comes together, and here we are now, impending a week from the inauguration of one of those terrible people to occupy the White House, which we all swore never would, and we lost, and he is. We're going to have to ask those questions of why did so many people that should agree with us, people who would have loved the policies that were going to come out, why did they either A, not hear about them, B, not hear about them enough for it to sink in, or C, not connect it to the people who are going to do the good things? And so I think we have to ask that hard question. I think I know some of the answers. They'll piss people off, but it's what I do. But yeah, it's disturbing. It's disturbing
because there's a formula, isn't there? There's like a media formula that traditional political parties slot into. Yeah. They do the rounds of the shows. They know exactly which shows they're going on. They appear on Jimmy Kimmel. Like it's a formula.
Yeah.
They do an SNL appearance. And it's like that checks all the boxes, and they're like, okay, did you do the media stuff? Yeah, did the media stuff. Did you do a bit of prep for the debates? Yeah, did a bit of prep for the debates. Trump doesn't do any of that. He certainly doesn't prep for debates. And I used to prep politicians in the UK for debate shows, and so that's my world. And what I saw here was like, whoa, this is near impossible. It's the environment is so unhealthy because it's so unnatural. It's not really a debate at all. If you're only given a certain amount of time, the mics aren't even on at the same time, so you can't debate. It's basically statements. Well, that's not a debate. No. It is literally you've created or you've been forced by nature of Trump's behavior back with Hillary Clinton in a debate. You've been forced to create a formula that is so unhealthy and unnatural. And we saw Tim Walz failed to be able to be himself in that environment because it was so unnatural.
Yeah, so, and I would have loved to see more to him. Totally. Tim Walz is the kind of guy, I get him so much. We're almost the same age. We're both middle-aged, former, veterans, white guys from the Midwest. I mean, there's a lot. I have a lot in common with Tim.
Right.
And Tim's like me. You could throw him on any issue. I could talk football for 30 minutes. Easy. I don't know shit about football. I could talk professional wrestling. Do I know shit about no, but I could talk about. You know why? You get to a certain point in your life, you got 3 or 4 kids, you learn. I could talk about Fortnite for an hour. Yeah. Right. You have opinions and it would be great. And it's entertaining and it's fun. They never want to do that. And we have to get the Democratic side. And this goes for everyone. This goes for, it goes for candidates. It goes for electeds. It goes for staffers. Because a lot of times, let's be honest, it's not the candidate doesn't want to do your show. He never even heard you invited him.
Right.
You know, you have to go through a young person maybe who is the comms staffer who went through college in comms, probably did comms at 16 on a city council race. You know, they've been in politics for longer than you and I have, and they're probably 24. And they're like, oh, well, how many followers do you have on your little show? That's sweet. You know, we've got an MSNBC hit next week. And, you know, look, they'll go on MSNBC. Let's be honest. I'll be very honest with you guys. MSNBC hit will get a congressional candidate. Man, they'll get $10,000 off of them. Pay money. People will donate. There's money to be had there. So they look at that. It's like, what can I make a public face and make some money and do, and it's easy and I could prep my guy for. And then every staffer is absolutely terrified of the idea of their guy going on a show like this, where we get him for 30 minutes just to bullshit, tell some dad jokes, talk about how bad Minnesota football is, whatever it may be. And so that's the problem. A lot of times, like I'm sure, you know, I've had this situation so many times where I'm literally begging staffers like, look, you know, just let us have him, man. Give me the guy, give me the lady. I'll do him right. You know, we'll have a very honest conversation. I'm not going to be a sycophant, but we're going to have a real conversation, and people will know who your person is, that it's more than just the talking points. It's more than just, hey, by the way, abortion, you know, abortion, inflation. You know, it's like, okay, what's your opinion about, you know, getting stuck in traffic on I-95? Well, let me tell you about that. You know, and
but the difference is you want to talk about abortion as opposed to hear a list of statements about abortion. Right. And this is the difference that I guess they're missing. And ironically, Donald Trump is not a conversationalist. No. He doesn't really know how to do that. He doesn't have the social skills to do that by nature of his insecurity and his narcissistic personality disorder. He's just not a natural in that stuff, but he can fake it, and he fakes it quite well. And in the case of Joe Rogan, he faked it for over 3 hours. 3 hours. And that's not the only one, though. That's what I'm saying, Anthony. I saw him on Theo Von. I saw him on the Undertaker show. Those were not a few minutes. We saw clips. He was on there for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. Yeah. He can fake it and watch, and those fans are all watching it. And I call this time mass diversified media. I actually came up with the term because, you know, I'm an Army officer. We do that. And we still have mass media, but it's very diversified. You and I are now, this show is part of the mass media. You know, you get 100,000 views a show. That's a big show. That's an MSNBC hit worth of views. Yes. You know, and you know, look, CNN at one point in the last month was down to like, what was it, 280,000, 500,000 viewers a day? Our videos get more than that in a couple hours on this network of 3.5 million subscribers when you talk about Midas Touch. And so we really need a change of perspective that, look, your guys got to do shows. I begged them. Look, if I was running that campaign, I would have put Tim Waltz in a room that looks like yours, you know, stuck a microphone, given him a Diet Coke and said, all right, you've got 4 appearances the next hour. Right. You know what I mean? And just circled assholes like you and me through, you know, for hours. I'm down.
For hours,
and we all reached out to them. I certainly reached out to them. But you hear crickets. And I think you're right about the fact that it's likely interns who are checking the messages. Right. And 100%. That's the thing about independent media. It's not well connected, and we need to get to the point where we become well connected, because Trump has known all of these people that interview him for decades. I mean, we saw this with Joe and Mika going and kissing the ring, that they were friends. They used to socialize. And so, but we are not like that, partly because, you know, post-pandemic, or courtesy of the pandemic, it legitimized us all working from home. And the fact that we are completely isolated, and a lot of us live in remote places or on even in different countries. And so we're not rubbing shoulders with politicians or with their assistants in the halls of Washington. Those days are over. Yeah. And yet the politicians themselves, certainly Democrats, because Republicans do not give interviews unless it's on one of 3 or 4 networks. Right. They're just not connecting with us in that way. And the
people want to hear their story.
They want to hear the story. And that is a nail in the coffin for Democrats being elected from this point onwards.
I'm hearing good things. I mean, I feel like I've started to hear rumblings from a number of the folks who got elected this cycle. You know, I had the good fortune. I actually interviewed about 35 candidates for Senate and Congress this cycle, Democrats. I call it the In the Hot Seat series, like 15-minute interviews, boom. And several of them got elected, which is exciting. And they seem to remember, oh yeah, okay, I know that guy, you know. And I'm hoping I hope the messaging is getting to the media staffers in Congress and on campaigns. Like, look, you're going to have to start reaching out to these organizations. And what got me was how many reached out to me this cycle. There is a movement of people who understand. I had Jake Auchincloss on my show, my Sunday show last week. He was fantastic. He jumped right in when I invited him. You know, I've had people pop in whenever they can. There are those who seem to kind of get it. You know, and I hope we see more of it, that we can reach an audience they're not reaching, because, you know, my audience on my show, I don't know what yours is, but my show is decidedly older. You know, I'm gray. You know, I think it's like 45 and up is my entire audience, which is awesome. I love you guys. But you know what my audience is? I was at an event in DC, like a summit campaign, like a professional summit. And they had a panel with influencers. It's kind of funny. And they had all these Gen Z kids up there talking about getting people to vote. You can integrate, you can work together. And I'm like, and I was literally sitting next to, you'll love this, the woman who does government relations for Rumble, truly. and we had become, you know, we're hanging out, go figure. And she starts nudging me like, dude, you got to say something, because you're an influencer, you know, but you don't look like those kids. Right. And I got up, I said, if you guys are relying on your version of an influencer as a kid on TikTok and not seeing people like me and Anthony, who's got an audience that donates money. One of my candidates I interviewed for Senate, it was her biggest fundraising day of the year to that point, the day she appeared on a 15-minute show on Midas Touch. Because our audience cares, our audience has disposable income, they're a little older, and they'll put their money where their heart is, and maybe kids don't. So I said, you know, you've got to really expand. These are campaign professionals. That's what stunned me the most. And I spoke to her about it. I was like, these are people in this room who do this for a living in campaigns. And their idea of outreach to independent media influencers was a bunch of Gen Z kids with TikToks. And I'm like, okay, you know, there's a much wider audience for you to reach. And YouTube's the largest social network on earth. You know, it's disturbing sometimes. We're going to have to change, not, like I said, not just the candidates, they're there, but the electeds, the staff, and the consultants to say, the world has changed. You have to expand your aperture to understand that places like Midas Touch are as important for you to reach out to as MSNBC hits at this point.
We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about the terrorist attack that took place on New Year's Day. Because
it's all good news this week, brother.
Yes, the news has been very, very sad. And with the benefit of your experience in the army, I just want to kind of look at it maybe from a slightly different perspective. We'll do that next here on The Weekend Show. Are you ready to jumpstart your health in 2025? Well, Lumen can help. Did you know that 80% of resolutions fail by February? You can beat the odds with Lumen and improve your health. I found a valuable tool that gives me insights to create a healthy metabolism for my body, and it's managed to improve other aspects of my life as well. It's called Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you a tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know exactly what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day, based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep on top of your health game. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and better sleep. Take the next step to improving your health. Go to lumen.me/weekend to get 20% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/weekend for 20% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. We're back on The Weekend Show with Fred Wellman. I'm Anthony Davis. Fred, this start to the year did not start well. A terrorist attack that killed 14 people in New Orleans. Unacceptable, inexcusable, and emblematic of a failing nation whose president ranks as the worst in history. Who said that? Donald Trump. Yes, the use of language by Donald Trump, and in fact a whole lot of the MAGA Republicans, moments after this event happened, was to weaponize immigration and, use language that had no bearing on the facts or the story. And in fact, let me just quote Trump's Truth Social post. He said, "When I said that the criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country, that statement was constantly refuted by Democrats and the fake news media, but it turned out to be true." And that's what he wrote on New Year's Day, hours after a U.S. Army officer plowed into a crowd of revelers. This is the reality that we face now, that truth is irrelevant. And Trump knows that he can set the agenda, the news narrative, by being first, even if it's completely made up.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And of course, all that was not true. We know now that obviously Shamsu Din-Jabbar was an American citizen, born and raised in Beaumont, Texas, lived in Houston, was in the Army for a period, left the Army in 2020. By every measure, had a very successful transition from the military. A lot of people want to blame the military. The PTSD is like he was in human resources and IT. He wasn't a combat. He wasn't kicking down doors. And so we were able to kind of dig in that very quickly. And what it appeared is his life went awry. His marriage failed. His finances failed. He blamed a lot of people except himself. At some point, probably had some sort of a psychological break from reality and decided to dedicate himself to essentially extreme Islam. Literally tied himself to IS, strapped a flag onto the vehicle, and did this attack. And it's shocking for me as an Army veteran, and to see that one of our own could go so far astray for the values that we uphold. But you're right, to see the political ramifications, the fallout. I did a show about that this week with Mike Johnson blaming all the Republicans blaming the border, and the border had nothing to do with it whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. It is frustrating. I mean, I'm old to remember when the terrorist attack occurred, we all rallied around the flag. Remember that term? What a cute term that was. Right. Rally around the flag and support the president. There's no such thing now. It's rally around our political cause and see who we could screw by weaponizing this information. And it is led by Fox News, it's led by the political people like Donald Trump, and we all pay a price for it, I think.
And you say the political people like Donald Trump. I mean, the guy won the election with that rhetoric. Literally with that rhetoric, which almost begs the question, are they looking forward to mass murder events? Like, are they hoping that the timing of something happening falls just before election day so they can weaponize it? That's the darkest, if we go to the darkest places with this, because, and we've had this conversation when it comes to school shootings and mass shootings and thoughts and prayers and all that stuff, is that they have literally weaponized the death, the killing of individuals, including children, to make their point, not just for the Second Amendment, but also to show strength. I mean, that was really the theme of Trump's campaign was strength. And yet he's probably the weakest, most vulnerable individual there is who thinks that he has control over world leaders. And that's proving that it's simply not the case.
It's very much that narcissistic personality that he has, the psychotic personality, if you ask me, of letting others do the dirty work, of course, and he just kind of tries to stay out of it. And he gets a real weird, kick out of making people do terrible things. He gets a weird kick out of other people suffering. He enjoys.
He's a sadist, really.
Exactly. Truly, in every shape or form. Yeah. Jesus, if you remember the Epstein tapes right before the election, talking about how he was sleeping with friends' wives on purpose.
Yes.
Just to sort of make them suffer and see if they would dare to cross him. It is a very sick man. And again, we go back to our conversation earlier. Why did more Americans not know about that? I'd love to ask that question of the people who ran. It's been left to others, but you're right. And to see this disgusting attack, and there's no excusing him. There's no excusing Matthew Livelsberger, the guy who blew himself up in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Both of them clearly had psychological problems, but in the end, you're responsible for yourself. It's not an excuse by any means whatsoever that either of them did these things. Again, as an Army veteran, it's troubling to me, especially you see Livelsberger, and he clearly had a lot of mental issues associated with the Army service. But yeah, the politicization of tragedy is you're right. It's funny. Trump is right. It is a sign of a collapsing society, but it's not the attack. It's the reaction to it and the manipulation of the truth and the facts. The facts are all over the place. On the Livelsberger one, the Las Vegas one, I wrote a piece just about how I hate saying this, and we're going to get comments again, is the right's been manipulating that one, and sort of people on our side have been manipulating that one. It's like, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. And the truth is a very off his rails soldier who decided to, who with some really stupid, crazy beliefs and probably traumatic brain injury that led him to have delusions, that he was being followed and sleeping problems and nightmares, and decided to take his own life in a spectacular way on purpose.
But this is the cost of a decade of hate speech from Donald Trump. So exactly. you can't say these terrible things about immigrants, these terrible things about Democrats, these terrible things about anybody who doesn't kiss your ring.
And military leaders. I mean, if you look at
military leaders, right?
Yeah, you look at Livelsberger,
without there being consequences. And we saw a guy a couple of years ago go into an FBI building and try and shoot it up, right? And he got shot and killed there and then by security. But that was it was the first event for me where I was like, this is the effect of the negativity and the abuse and the hate and the constant anger towards Democrats. And I think that this is, the consequences of this are only going to get worse, which suggests to me that America is becoming less safe as a result of all of this hate speech.
And I get worried. I'm actually writing it down. That's how I'm doing it. Is, one of the things a lot of us have been saying is served is this constant attack on the woke leadership of the military, this constant berating, the Tommy Tuberville holding nominations because they were too woke. Many of us have been saying this is going to undermine national security. It's going to split the enlisted and the officer ranks from each other, which have to work together. It's going to cause lower ranking and junior people to turn on senior ranking. This is all bad for us because I need them to go to defend our country together at some point. Okay. And so what shocked me was reading the actual notes that are on Livelsberger's phone that the Las Vegas police released. He talks about we're being led by weak people. DEI has destroyed our nation. These are words right the F out of Tommy Tuberville's mouth, right out of Donald Trump's mouth, right out of Steve Bannon, right? I mean, so for years, this cascade of dirty lies about military leaders who wouldn't simply knuckle under to Trump is paying off in the way they wanted to, which is a national security apparatus that is turning on itself. And if Americans aren't fucking terrified of that, they better be. Because the fact that a master sergeant is not a kid. This guy had 19 years in the Army, okay? He was that's the second highest rank in the non-commissioned officer rank, okay? He was not a kid, okay? And he's sounding off talking about these things. He said these things out loud within his unit, and no one said a word. I hear rumors because a lot of them agree. That's a terrifying thing for me as a person who served. We didn't talk about I could not look back right now. I have no idea what the politics of my bosses were. There's very few. I could pull a thread here and there. Like one was a stream of evangelical try to get me to go to like this men's retreat thing. And I'm like, okay, I kind of see you. But for the most part, I couldn't tell you where any, and I worked for people named Dempsey and Petraeus. And I worked for some pretty big names in the Army over the years. And I couldn't tell you what their politics was in all those years. I bet you right now, you sure as F can, that our service members.
But at officer level, am I right in saying that they still have Fox News playing in the outmess?
Yeah, right? It's funny. You're going to laugh because I have fought that's a constant thing on the left. They say, oh, we have to turn off Fox News. And I'll be honest, I said, oh, that's too simplistic. That's not the reason. I'm starting to have second thoughts, like, oh shit, I might actually be wrong. I think we should turn that shit off. I mean, I know a lot of VAs have turned, like the VA has banned news. I've heard some of the VA centers have banned news because people are getting in fights just waiting, so it's like, I notice when I've gone to a lot of government facilities, it's the, HGTV. And if I have to see one more house get remodeled, it's fine. I'll fucking watch houses get remodeled. But
rather that than far right propaganda.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's been proven. I mean, there's that documentary, The Brainwashing of My Dad, where this daughter records her father's trips in the car listening to Rush Limbaugh to a 2-hour drive to his job every day and then coming home and watching Fox. And within a few years, he was a completely different person.
I can attest to that. I live in Missouri. I have family members that grew up on Rush Limbaugh because he always started here in Boonville, Missouri. And that's exactly true. And so even I've kind of I have to write a piece about it, apologize to a lot of people that I've besmirched on social media, because I think there is something to be said about that as these folks are sitting around, they are getting fed. And because Fox has become such an extremist thing, there's no playing around that Fox News isn't a direct tie to the Republican Party. Decoding Fox News, Julia Jeske was on my show. If you've had Julia on your show,
a couple of times,
amazing. And she just out of a lark today put out a pie chart of what political party people belong to on Fox News this year. Literally, it's red. There's this tiny little sliver of blue. It literally is. It's an arm of the Republican Party, and they don't pretend to be otherwise anymore. You're right. At some point, we have to recognize that it's a political tool, and it shouldn't be broadcast in government facilities. I'm not even just saying the army. The military. I'm saying everywhere. We should not be broadcasting what is clearly political propaganda into the minds of people who are focusing on the government. But yeah, I mean, Livelsberg especially, the things he said in those notes was extreme and terrifying.
Well, he said he wanted Democrats culled from the government. The word culled is obviously extreme. He also did that. There was, if I just quote from one of his postings, he said this was not a terrorist attack. It was a wake-up call. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. What better way to get my point across than a stunt with fireworks and explosives? And remember, he shot himself before the bomb went off in the back of the truck.
Yeah. Military people have kind of a dark sense of humor. It's just the way we are. And one of my military friends said, Fred, it was really kind of just a suicide with flair. I'm like, okay. That's one way to look at it. Yeah. Exactly. It was a suicide. It wasn't, that's why I've kind of said, well, it wasn't necessarily MAGA terrorist. And by the way, we would have never seen his manifestos had the Las Vegas police not published them. Those were not posted anywhere. Those were on his phone in the Notes app. So I'm sure they had their reasons. I'm not sure what it was, but we never would have known he even wrote that stuff, is my understanding. But having said that, obviously anyone who's in the military, a senior NCO in the military with the Green Berets of all people, who harbors these kind of feelings about his fellow Americans is terrifying. We swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States, not a political party. And the idea that someone, one of our most highly skilled special operators, is walking around harboring the idea, well, we need to cull a certain political party or even color, because there was a little racism in there too about DEI, et cetera, that should scare people. And in a normal world, we would act very quickly on that. But we already know that when the army and the military tried to do programs on extremism and examine extremism in the ranks, it was shut down by the Republicans fast, by people like Tuberville and Josh Hawley and others who, don't you remember Tuberville saying they call them white nationalists, but I just call them patriots. Like, right. Well, your patriot just blew himself the fuck up in front of the Las Vegas Trump Tower to make a statement to kill other Americans. I call him a fucking terrorist. So
there is no statute for domestic terrorism still in the U.S.
Still. Which is amazing, right?
And to me, that speaks to the fact that a terrorist needs to have brown skin, speak with an Arabic accent, have a head covering on. I mean, that kind of movie version of a terrorist, it hasn't really changed in the U.S.
Yeah, and we know that most of the mass killings that have occurred have been tied to right-wing violence in the last years. I mean, I think Jessica Tarlov was on Fox the other day and kind of blew them away on Fox the other day, given the actual numbers compared to the two types of attacks.
Right.
Because there's this disconnect from the reality of what's happening. Look, Livelsberg didn't kill anybody. I was hesitant to call him a MAGA terrorist because even in terms of what is terrorism, you could argue left and right and back and forth. I know many people did argue with me about it, but in the end, what we do see is someone who failed to get the help he deserved. He did go get some mental health. He didn't do enough. I mean, they diagnosed him with depression, which is a classic maneuver by military people. I've been depressed. Well, and they don't dig deeper. So, well, you got PTSD, you got traumatic brain injury. They don't tell the guy about the fact they're having nightmares and delusions and they're paranoid and thinking people are following them. They just, I'm just depressed. Okay, here's a little bit of medicine and, take walks when you're sad. Why do I know this? That's what happened to me. I had PTSD. You get very good at covering up that wound. So I'm hesitant to blame the Army's mental health programs for that. When a service member, a guy who's 37 years old, refuses to get the help he knows he needs, at some point, self-responsibility steps in. In this case, I do blame Matthew Livelsberg for not getting the help he needed, and taking out others and ruining other people's lives in his effort to, whatever he was trying to do. But
of course, the help that people need is probably going to be removed by Elon Musk and this, desire to kind of strip the cost out of, with this Department of Government Efficiency to take away things that don't appear to have value on the face of it.
Warfighter. I mean, they'll go after DEI first. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all they get rid of the mental health programs because that's soft. Only cowards need mental health support.
Right.
I fully expect the mental health programs within the military and Department of Veterans Affairs to be gutted quickly for the very purpose of it's not manly. It's not cool. Alpha. It's not alpha to get medical or mental health care. It's this deranged view of toxic masculinity that undermines all of these and underlies all of these activities by these guys who are some of the weakest, softest men I've ever seen in my life. It wouldn't survive a fucking day in Ranger School. So I drop a lot of F-bombs. I apologize. But yeah, it's an interesting time, and I do worry about what we face. Here it is, mid-January, and we're quickly accelerating into what will be the Trump term. And some of the things they've promised to do from day one with Stephen Miller and all these others. And I think for you and I as professionals too, the challenge would be, we can't just hit the alarm about everything. We could spend every day making 5-minute videos about the latest outrageous thing. We're going to have to kind of pick and choose our battles to a certain extent and focus. I've been doing a lot more stuff on veterans issues recently than I have in years past. I also work with Vote Vets, which is a great organization, but it seems to be able to help people on our side understand the nuances of that world. So I'm finding myself diving more into that than I have in the past, because we're going to see a lot of stuff around military and veteran. I mean, this guy wants to invade fucking Greenland, for God's sake. It's like, I mean, did you see the discussion? Like they're actually discussing how far can we invade Mexico and get away with it? Which, circling back to our earlier discussion of what can I get away with is Donald Trump's real guy.
But we are seeing, because, some people, I mean, Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico was having none of it.
None of it.
Justin Trudeau traveled to Mar-a-Lago for a hug. And so, and he announced his resignation on Monday.
Yep.
And which again is another sad day for democracy, because I think I posted on Blue Sky that we need good, mentally healthy people running our countries. It's really important that as we see these individuals fall because of the pressure of the far right media and propaganda from the opposition, that they will fall. And we're seeing this around the world. And
it's a worldwide phenomenon.
Right. The collapse of governments, France and Germany and South Korea. And so it's becoming a real thing. And my fear is that Trump knows this. Bannon has been talking for years about the world order and neoliberalism and wanting to, and so it's a real thing when he talks about wanting to make Canada the 51st state. He does it with a glint in his eye and with a joke, but he is not joking.
No, he's not capable of joking. He's a sociopath. Right. He's not making. Yeah. He'll giggle, but he's not joking. And he's lied a lot, and people are going to find out he lied a lot. And we're going to rely on people who are mature and make good decisions. And I'm afraid when you read something like Livelsberger's manifesto, those people are the people he hates. The people that stopped them from invading Mexico, for example. And so I do worry about what that does to our national security apparatus, and we'll pay a price. And look, we've seen this story before. After World War II, people forget that after World War II, we quickly demobilized all of our troops. We were done with war after 4 years, 5 years. We demobilized, we disarmed, we mothballed fleets. And then North Korea invaded South Korea, and China joined them, and we got our asses kicked. Everybody forgets one of the things we use a lot in the Army is a thing called Task Force Smith. And Task Force Smith was the small battalion task force that was sent into Korea to hold the line against the North Korean onslaught, and was overrun in one of the greatest defeats in American history because they were completely unprepared. Their weapons jammed. They didn't have cold weather gear. And those are the kind of things, and we used to say it was a battle cry. I served my first tour in the Army in Korea in 1988. Our battle cry was no more Task Force Smiths. And I fear a day will come when all this piles on after years and years and years, these young guys who are against the woke leadership will end up being generals someday if they stay in, that we will pay a price at some point, and it will be much worse than Task Force Smith, because that was 1950 and this is 2025. And so guys like me really get upset when we hear these things, because we know that this isn't just today. It's our country's future for the next 20, 30 years. Our national security for 20, 30 years. The weakening that Donald Trump does today in the military, we will pay a price for decades to come. it is. I think when I read those notes from Livelsberger, that's the cold chill I got down my neck, which was, Jesus, is he training young soldiers with this mentality? Is he expressing this desire, this disrespect for the chain of command to other soldiers? Those guys are going to be in the Army for 20 years, 30 years. What are we going to have in the next decades, the rest of my life, if you will, for military, if they're so politicized that they are going to pick and choose who they follow based on what they believe they vote? It's a terrifying thought.
I watched the movie Civil War a few weeks ago, which I didn't enjoy particularly. But what was interesting about it is they designed it so you didn't really know who were the goodies and who were the baddies.
Right.
You didn't even know what side the president was on. And that was a kind of very clever observation of this film.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're getting to. And with Trump kind of denigrating the military, I mean, his constant referrals to the withdrawal of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It's like, considering that he's a man with zero military experience and plenty of bone spurs, apparently. I mean, if he thinks that to evacuate that many people and that much gear is going to go completely smoothly, then, I don't know I don't have military experience, but to me, that was a relatively successful withdrawal by all accounts.
Yep.
And yet he has created this myth that it was a disaster and that he now wants to court-martial or bring back Mark Milley and court-martial any of these individuals who were involved in it.
Yep. That's terrifying. And that's another norm and tradition goes out the window of bringing back retirees for court-martial. I don't know. I have friends that could be in that position. Even people close to me, like and so
people who've given a lifetime of service. I mean, that's the other thing, really, isn't it?
Try to do the right thing, trying to do the right thing, and serve your country without reservation, without without consequence of politics or otherwise, sacrificing your family. Most of us sacrificed our families in some way, sacrificing our health. As I mentioned, I'm on my 5th surgery since I retired from the Army. I've had 5 surgeries. From all damage from what I got in the Army. I mean, we sacrifice a lot. Your family sacrifices a lot. And to have it be smirched so easily by people who never served a day is terrifying. Even more terrifying is seeing it be smirched by people who have served and have decided that politics is more important than their oath to the Constitution. It's something I say a lot since they're in the anniversary of January 6th is, Sick Nick was a veteran as well as young woman Ashley Babbitt that got killed. Both of them thought they were upholding their oath to the Constitution, right? That's how far fact and reality has diverted from the reality of what we live in, that the person attacking the Capitol thought they were upholding the Constitution, right, and the person defending it thought he was. And good luck convincing either otherwise. And it's a terrifying moment. And we're now getting ready to start another 4 years of that shit.
People are swayed by the visual. I mean, with the withdrawal of Afghanistan, it was that image of Afghanis running after the C-17 that basically stuck in people's minds.
Yep. And
that wasn't even really what was happening. I mean, that aircraft had already landed and was taxiing, I think. And yet the media, right-wing media, turned that story into being, this is how terrible the evacuation is. This aircraft is leaving and it's leaving all these people behind.
Yep. And our men and women did heroic things on the ground. I know the young man who was leading those Marines who were killed, and he's paid a price for it in his mental health, I think, as well as his professional life. And it's hard. It's hard losing men and women. It's hard picking and choosing who lives and who dies. Again, an entire thing that was set up by Donald Trump. The withdrawal timeline was started by Donald Trump. Withdrawing us to a point, taking enough troops out that we had no choice but withdraw, was the ultimate setup. And the fact that he walks away with no responsibility when he is the one who created the entire timeline in the end that we had no choice but follow. We couldn't have done otherwise because we didn't have enough troops to stop the Taliban.
Meanwhile, the Taliban were coming over the hill, literally heading towards the airport as this was happening.
Right. Exactly. And again, the skill of our military members on the ground, the only reason the airport wasn't overrun, we didn't lose more. The skill of them to be able to stand there and actually coordinate with Taliban guards. It's incredible what happened on the ground there. And then the many veterans like myself and people like our friend Jason Kander who stepped in to save lives in heroic ways. It is an assault on all of those people when Donald Trump and his weak people that support him attack those people for doing what they thought was their duty and have been told. Again, it's I don't know. I tried to be really good about not getting despondent or upset about things as the election and unfolded. But yeah, as we get closer to that day where he takes office again, it's hard not to when you see much of the work you've done in your life. Before I ever entered politics, I was, it's only been politics, 5 years I've been in politics, not even that. But for 22 years of my adult life, I served in uniform and was passionate about that service. To see so much of that smeared, to see it damaged, to see the reputation damaged, to see fellow veteran committing act of violence, mass violence, it disturbs me. And it also disturbs me that knowing that culture and that community that I served, there will be more. And
I think
unless we act,
the word that comes up time and time again, Fred, is expertise, and how experts, whether it be you in the military with your training, or whether it be Dr. Anthony Fauci advising us to wear masks or not wear masks or get vaccinated.
Yeah.
All of these people with experience, lifelong experience, who have learnt their trade or their craft and are providing service, are being diluted and devalued by somebody who has no experience in anything, who's a two-bit realtor, who flips commercial properties. Yep. That's basically what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
And to the point that by removing all of the expertise from the institutions and replacing these leaders with loyalists or people like RFK Jr., who are conspiracy theorists, or Dr. Oz, or any of these literally like TV nutters.
Yep.
That for me is the biggest issue that we will face going forward, because if there's another pandemic again and people do not heed the advice that is given, then we're going to see a lot more than 1.2 million people die as a result of it.
Yep, I agree. These are we've learned already from the first Trump administration, there really is a cost. It's not just 4 years that people will die. And I ran a COVID field hospital. I know exactly how it went. I was running a COVID field hospital the day he thought we should stuff lights up our butts and use bleach in our, I remember sitting there with actual doctors just dumbfounded that the president of the United States was just, jamming on ideas. Right. And we were literally treating patients. We had no idea how this disease is going to go. I remember distinctly, because that's about the same time we started getting briefings on COVID toe, which is a new symptom that came up at that point where people's toes turn purple. We really didn't even know what we were dealing with at that point. And here's the president of the United States suggesting these cockamamie ideas. Bad things can happen in 4 years. And I guess that's what worries me the most. And, we'll continue to do our part of calling it out. I do take solace in the fact that I do believe that public pressure still works. Donald Trump is a lame duck president as of January 20th. A lot of the progressives like, if we ever have an election again, we'll have elections again. Even Orban has elections, It's just about us organizing well and doing the hard work it takes to convince people to get out and be part of it. And show. I do take solace in the fact that these people are all awesome, monumentally incompetent. They'll hate each other. Right. Let's be honest, the Republicans all hate each other. We learned that lesson in Missouri, where the Democrats, the super minority Democrats here, are very good at manipulating the Republicans because they hate each other as much as they hate us. And so they, look at Johnson barely getting his speakership. So being able to divide them against each other and split off people, I think that's going to be a skill that our friends in the Congress have to learn very quickly. And for us as the public, we have a voice. The Gates resignation is a perfect example that we can use our voices. We can pressure these people because the senators know they're going to get reelected. The congressmen know they have to face reelection. There's still ways for us to pressure them, despite Elon Musk's money or otherwise. So hell, let's be honest. Musk knows it. It's obvious that Elon Musk thinks there are going to be more elections because he's threatening every Republican to primary them, to fund a primary, So take solace from Elon Musk, so we have power. We have to use our voices. We have to use our voices loud together. And I think we can do it. Again, like I talked about the local elections and statewide elections, we can send a powerful message. Hey, when Glenn Youngkin won Virginia a year after Biden's election, that sent a shockwave across the country. We could do the same. And I think we need to wake them up that no, you will face consequences for your loyalty to Donald Trump and your destruction of our American institutions.
And maybe focusing also on the 90 million people that chose not to vote, who stayed out, because
that's everything to me.
That is for me, that's where it's at, that these are the people who, the silent majority, and reaching those people who are not necessarily engaged with the news or with politics, who don't really understand how valuable they are, and giving them a sense that they are of value, that they are needed, that this is a duty that is required of them, and that they can actually make life better for everybody.
Yep, I agree, and that's what I talk about all the time on Blue Sky and everywhere else. Is look, we just have to activate. We have to reach those who didn't. I'm not going to try and convince any MAGA anymore. I'm done with that. They'll make their own decisions. But we have to convince the people on our side who are aligned in our values, at least even partially, because it's not going to be perfect. The search for perfection in our coalition is never going to work. We're always going to have differences. I hate these means tests, or these tests that people like to use, like, oh, well, you're against this, so I can't support you. It's like, right. Okay, no, we're going to have to figure out a way to figure out how we work together in the the pro-democracy movement, which is what we talk about a lot. And overturn these elections and stop these guys and win elections and overturn bad laws. And I just, we will. I have faith that I'm not sure the institutions will be perfect, but the institutions will hold. I think a lot of people are I wouldn't be surprised at all if John Roberts is horrified by what he created. I hope so. And we'll see. I guess we're going to get a lot of tests here soon to find out, won't we?
Well, I hope they get the great riches that they were hoping for, because, that's unfortunately seems to be at the heart of so many of these decisions. Yeah. Fred, we have to finish, but I'm very grateful to you for joining us on the weekend show.
My pleasure. Always good seeing you, my friend.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. You can see more from me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast. And I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.